Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will lose his law license after his term is over because he's engaging in flatly unethical behavior. You can't have a fake settlement with fake negotiations with essentially one entity negotiating against itself and then just paying out taxpayer money that Congress never authorized to go to criminals.
Representative Ted Lieu just brought the ultimate smoking gun to a political showdown. At this very moment, the United States is split into two vastly different realities. In the first, ordinary citizens are being squeezed dry. We're looking at working families gathered around the kitchen table, stressing over their utility bills, panicking over their mortgage rates, and desperately trying to figure out how to survive until payday. But over in the second reality, one inhabited by the current administration's U.S. Treasury is essentially functioning as their private ATM. We are looking at a $1.8 billion paper trail that this administration presumably hoped to sneak right past the American taxpayers. This is far beyond standard partisan bickering. It is a forensic breakdown of a government that is purposefully turning a blind eye to a crippling cost of living crisis to build a gigantic financial reservoir for convicted felons. Before we unpack the pure legal madness of how they miraculously located nearly $2 billion, and exactly why the highest-ranking attorney at the IRS stepped down in protest, you have to hear the groundwork Ted Lieu lays down. Pay close attention to the stark contrast he illustrates right here.
We have a cost of living emergency in America. Gas prices are skyrocketing, grocery prices are surging, mortgage rates are climbing, and what are Trump and Republicans focused on? A $1 billion taxpayer-funded ballroom, a giant arch in D.C. to honor Trump, and now we learn a nearly $1.8 billion slush fund to pay criminals who are friends of Donald Trump, including January 6 rioters. November is coming.
November is coming. That isn't merely a campaign catchphrase, it's a direct threat. Let's take a second to break down the picture Lieu just painted, because the underlying context is genuinely mind-boggling. Earlier during this very same press briefing, Congressman Brendan Boyle highlighted the bleak economic landscape. Gas prices in certain regions spiked from under $3 to north of $4.50 a gallon in a mere 2 months, a staggering 50% jump. Meanwhile, 15 million citizens are staring down the barrel of losing their medical coverage due to aggressive budget slashing. And exactly how does this administration react to this widespread financial devastation? By pushing for a $1 billion ballroom equipped with a helipad, a massive archway in the Capitol to celebrate themselves, and most terrifyingly, a $1.8 billion reserve fund to bail out the insurrectionists from January 6. While everyday people fight just to keep food on their plates, the executive branch is laser-focused on compensating criminals. But how exactly does someone just stumble upon nearly $2 billion within the federal budget? You can't simply draft a check of that size. You require a mechanism. You need a systemic loophole. Keep watching until the end, because the exact second Lieu details how they orchestrated this massive payout serves as a masterclass in holding rogue, Constitution-defying officials fully accountable. Make sure to subscribe, because when the Department of Justice begins operating like a cartel's accounting firm, you absolutely need to see the proof. To truly grasp the unbelievable arrogance behind this $1.8 billion slush fund, you first need a quick refresher on how federal spending actually operates. According to the United States Constitution, the power of the purse belongs exclusively to Congress. The commander-in-chief isn't allowed to just wave a magic wand and distribute billions in cash. If he desires funding for any initiative, he is legally required to approach Congress, make his case, and secure their legislative approval. However, this administration actively avoided Congress, fully aware they would never receive a green light to funnel taxpayer dollars to convicted rioters. Consequently, they engineered a backdoor. They pulled off a massive legal illusion. Watch as Ted Lieu completely rips the disguise off of this operation.
Now, let me tell you a little bit about why this nearly $1.8 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund is completely unethical and totally ridiculous. First of all, it came as a result of a settlement between the IRS and the Department of Justice. Well, it turns out both those agencies are the same entity because they both report to Donald Trump. So it's like settling with yourself. And with these fake negotiations and this fake settlement, magically appears nearly $1.8 billion to pay people who have been convicted of crimes.
Lieu doesn't need to resort to cheap gotcha journalism. Instead, He presents this structural absurdity as his primary piece of evidence. He zeroes in directly on the most fundamental rule of governmental checks and balances. A single entity cannot legally negotiate against itself to greenlight massive financial payouts. The smoking gun he presents is a phantom settlement completely fabricated by the executive branch. Just comprehend the magnitude here. We're talking about almost $1 billion. How is a settlement actually supposed to function? In normal circumstances, adversarial parties battle it out in a courtroom. They submit evidence, debate the merits, and eventually forge a compromise to spare themselves prolonged litigation costs. It is by definition a hostile process, but the legal framework applied here, as Lieu so expertly dismantles, relies on a deeply warped interpretation of the unitary executive theory. Since both the IRS and the Justice Department answer directly to the president, this was never an adversarial clash. This was a boss ordering his left hand to file a lawsuit against his right hand, only to declare that the right hand must compensate the left with $1 billion of your hard-earned tax money. It's like settling with yourself. That single phrase completely obliterates their entire cover story. They didn't secure these funds through a legitimate legal victory. They didn't earn congressional authorization. They merely gathered in a room, forged fraudulent documents, staged phantom negotiations, and conjured up a monumental payday for the president's political loyalists. This is exactly how you hold the untouchables to the fire, by exposing to the American people that the government is being manipulated to settle a multi-billion-dollar score with its own commander-in-chief. When you pull the trigger on a scheme this outrageously unlawful, you require attorneys to rubber stamp the paperwork. You need high-ranking officials who are fully willing to put their signatures on the dotted line just to give this phantom settlement an aura of legality. Enter Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Normally, politicians rely on highly sanitized, diplomatic language when calling out cabinet members. They'll offer generic statements like, "We vehemently disagree with the Attorney General's legal interpretation." That is absolutely not the route Ted Lieu takes here. Lieu isn't merely critiquing a policy decision. He is taking a lethal shot directly at Todd Blanche's professional livelihood. Watch this unfold.
People drafting this document know it's unethical. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will lose his law license after his term is over because he's engaging in flatly unethical behavior. You can't have a fake settlement with fake negotiations with essentially one entity negotiating against itself and then just paying out taxpayer money that Congress never authorized to go to criminals.
Notice the shift in Lieu's demeanor the moment the evidence pivots from shady bureaucratic deals to legitimate, career-ending consequences. Todd Blanche will lose his law license. Just let the gravity of that statement sink in. A sitting U.S. congressman, who is a practicing attorney himself, is staring directly into the lens and putting the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the country on notice. The argument he's constructing here is an inescapable snare for the administration. Circumventing Congress to authorize a multi-billion-dollar payout isn't merely poor policymaking. It transcends a simple partisan dispute. It is an offense worthy of total disbarment. Lawyers are governed by an incredibly rigid code of professional ethics. You are strictly forbidden from drafting fraudulent legal documents. You cannot participate in mock litigation designed to swindle the United States Treasury. By openly branding this as a fake settlement, Lieu is actively laying the foundation for a formal ethics grievance with the Bar Association. When an acting attorney general becomes completely consumed with facilitating the president's private slush funds rather than upholding the law, the facade of impartial justice completely vanishes. Lieu is broadcasting a dire warning to every single attorney currently employed at the DOJ. If you put your fingerprints on this document, if you greenlight this transaction, your career will evaporate the second this administration loses power. Predictably, Trump's loyalists will waste no time launching a counteroffensive. They will flood the cable news networks claiming that this is nothing more than a routine bureaucratic reallocation of funds. They will accuse Ted Lieu of playing dirty partisan games. But Lieu holds one ultimate trump card, and this is not a subjective opinion. This is a cold, devastating, undeniable fact. In the midst of any colossal financial cover-up, you always look for the insiders who refuse to play ball. You search for the people bailing out of the lifeboat before the ship goes under. Listen very closely to what transpired inside the IRS the moment they received the order to finalize this $1.8 billion fabricated settlement.
At the same time, our committees are going to do the work of what committees have always done in the past, which is oversight. So today, Ranking Member Raskin on House Judiciary is making a request for subpoenas to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and the other people that worked on this slush fund document. This $1.8 billion slush fund is so unethical that the general counsel of the IRS resigned because of it. So we want Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to come in right now and answer questions. If Republicans don't go along with that, we're going to get the gavels, as the chairman said, next term, and we will get Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche in if he lasts that long.
The absolute smoking gun in this scenario is a high-profile internal departure. The general counsel of the IRS resigned because of it. Let's hit pause right there. The general counsel is the absolute highest-ranking legal authority for the entire Internal Revenue Service. We are not talking about a junior intern. This is a seasoned legal professional whose sole responsibility is to guarantee the agency functions strictly within the parameters of federal tax legislation. Attorneys operating at the echelon do not quit their jobs over petty policy spats. They do not throw away decades of prestige over a minor scheduling dispute. They walk away when they are ordered to execute something overtly illegal. They resign the moment they review a contract, recognize it as a federal crime, and declare, "I am not spending time behind bars for you." If this arrangement is as flawlessly legal as the administration insists, why did the top attorney at the nation's premier tax authority jump ship? This is exactly why those in power furiously battle against transparency. It has nothing to do with ongoing litigation or typical legal settlements. It's because sunlight remains the ultimate disinfectant. When Lieu announces to the press corps that Jamie Raskin and the Judiciary Committee are drafting subpoenas, he is aggressively reclaiming the rule of law from an administration that treats public funds like a private defense shield. They are issuing Blanche an ultimatum: present yourself to Congress and testify under oath regarding this phantom settlement, or prepare to face the unmitigated fury of congressional subpoenas the moment Democrats reclaim the gavel this November. The underlying principle here is agonizingly straightforward. Accountability perishes in the dark corners of backroom deals. Just take a step back and survey everything we've exposed from a single press conference. We are dealing with a government that tells its own citizens to just suck it up when gas prices explode and inflation decimates household budgets. We are watching an administration eagerly slash medical coverage for 15 million citizens under the guise of fiscal responsibility. Yet, when it's time to fund a $1 billion taxpayer-subsidized ballroom, the cash is instantly available. When it involves a $1.8 billion slush fund meant for convicted January 6th rioters and loyalist cronies, they quite literally fabricate a fake settlement, sue their own agencies, push out their top legal minds, and magically summon the money out of thin air. The federal government is currently in the business of privatizing justice for the elite. They are weaponizing both the DOJ and the IRS not to protect the public, but to actively plunder them. And figures like Ted Lieu and Jamie Raskin are standing firm at the gates, clutching the receipts, and ensuring these officials know that the check is finally coming due. Now, I'm passing the mic over to you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Should any president be legally permitted to negotiate with himself in order to authorize a $1.8 billion payout against his own administration? And after learning about these fabricated negotiations, and the shocking resignation of the IRS General Counsel, do you believe Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche deserves to be stripped of his law license over this scandal? It is time to start naming the individuals who prioritize this shady deal over the United States Constitution. Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a beat when we bring the absolute receipts. Accountability is right around the corner. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.
I actually know what it's like to leave your blood soaking into the desert sand a half a word away. So I know what it's like. I know what it's like and what is at stake for the troops this administration is sending into harm's way. We must safeguard their valor and their professionalism by doing our jobs. I can tell you this, it's a whole lot easier to cover your eyes and order other Americans to sacrifice their children and sacrifice themselves if you don't have to do any of the sacrificing yourself. It's easier to send other people's children to fight in a war if you know your own children are cozy in a penthouse suite somewhere. It's easier to ignore the everyday realities of war from inside the hallowed halls of the White House, where you've got McDonald's being DoorDashed to the Oval Office. But it's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible if you've been actually outside the wire yourself. So I've come to the floor today to keep true a promise I first made over 2 decades ago. I ran for Congress, not because I wanted to be in Congress, not because I wanted to be a congressman or a senator. I ran for Congress to honor the men and women who carried me out of that bloody war zone. I made a promise that when the drums of war started beating again, I would be in a position to make sure that our elected officials fully consider the true cost of war, not just in terms of money, but in human lives and in the sacrifices of the.
Senator Tammy Duckworth just brought an undeniable receipt to a political knife fight. Notice how she immediately hooks the Senate by weighing the imagery of Trump's family insulated in luxury penthouses and fast food being delivered to the Oval Office against the grim reality of soldiers bleeding out in foreign deserts. We are witnessing a historic condemnation directed at a president unilaterally tossing American troops into the fires of the Middle East. This perfectly illustrates the classic chicken hawk scenario. Leaders who aggressively push for combat while guaranteeing their own families remain shielded. Keep watching until the end. Because watching Duckworth force the whole Senate to pick between constitutional law and Donald Trump's personal pride is a masterclass in trapping an out-of-control administration. Make sure to subscribe, because when the lives of U.S. service members are reduced to a PR stunt, you have to examine these receipts for yourself.
Sit up straight. Every time I was rolled into yet another surgery, I made sure to read the poster I had next to my hospital bed. It was a framed copy of the Soldier's Creed, the words that those lucky enough to wear the Army uniform live by. That same framed copy now hangs by my desk here in DC. And as I glanced at it this morning, I realized that there's perhaps no greater proof that Donald Trump never deigned to serve a day in his life than the mockery he makes of the Soldier's Creed's commitments every single day he has been in office. The creed may be associated with the Army, but the sentiments hold true for all of those who wear the uniform of this great nation. Its 13 lines tells us to be disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained, proficient, and to look out for those who look out for us, to look out for one another. Donald Trump is supposed to be our service members' commander-in-chief. The very least we should expect of him is to epitomize the standards that we ask our troops to swear by, to live by. The very least we should expect of the commander-in-chief is to be as competent, disciplined, and professional as the men and women whose very lives hinge on his capacity to lead, on that competence and professionalism we expect to see in the White House. The Creed makes clear that our troops will never quit, that they will never leave a fallen comrade behind, yet Cadet Bone Spurs is someone who will always quit. And every hour he orders our service members to remain in unnecessary growing danger, he is proving that Donald Trump does not give a damn about leaving a comrade or so many comrades behind.
Having established the true cost of war, Duckworth completely avoids cheap gotcha tactics to attack the president's character. Instead, she submits the Soldier's Creed straight into the Congressional record as undeniable proof. This is the foundational, unbending rule of the armed forces: never abandon a fallen brother in arms. The contrasting receipt she presents is the president's own history of evading the draft 5 separate times. Duckworth masterfully reveals the Trump administration's operational theory. He can casually command others to die, while historically retreating from danger himself. This is how you corner an untouchable figure, by demonstrating that the commander-in-chief fundamentally betrays the bedrock principles of the military he commands.
He may never have read the Constitution, but I have. So let me direct his attention to Article 1, which makes clear that only Congress has the power to declare war. We are the ones tasked with deciding when and how Americans are sent into combat. We are the ones charged with that most solemn duty. Yet Trump is acting as if Article 1 simply doesn't exist, as if obeying the Constitution is optional, as if our founding document is just a yellowing, crumbling piece of paper that he can crumble up and toss into the garbage can at will. This must not be a partisan issue. No matter if you're struggling to pay rent, or if your name is plastered in fake gold on a building on Fifth Avenue, no one can ignore the Constitution, especially if you've sworn an oath to defend it. No matter if you're a Mar-a-Lago worker pulling down double shifts of the President of the United States, no one is above the law. Look, I believe fully that there are certain solemn, urgent times when our military must be called upon to defend us. There are certain moments when the threat in question is significant and imminent, instances when military force is the most effective tool at hand, and that using it is necessary to protect America and her interests. The thing is, from what little information the Trump administration has shared publicly that he hasn't immediately contradicted, and sometimes the same sentence, this was not one of those times. But if the administration thinks that I'm wrong and there was imminent, reasonable, actual threat to America, then guess what? The floor is theirs. Come to the Senate. We're just 20 minutes from the White House. It's not hard to find. It's even faster in your motorcade, Mr. President. It's not hard to find us. We're the building with the big dome on top. We're only a 20-minute walk. Trump knows where the Capitol building is. It's the spot he told the insurrectionists to march towards on January 6th. So
This goes far beyond standard partisan bickering. It represents a constitutional stress test against a commander-in-chief who is entirely dismissing the legislative branch, as Duckworth wields the U.S. Constitution to confront unchecked executive authority. She leaves the pro-war faction in absolute, stunned silence. The ultimate receipt here isn't just about military overreach, it's the blatant hypocrisy. She dares the administration to walk 20 minutes to defend their case, ending with a brutal reminder: the president had no trouble finding the Capitol when he directed insurrectionists there on January 6th, yet suddenly suffers from amnesia when it comes to seeking congressional approval for war.
service members enough to prove why war with Iran is worth more children growing up without their mom or dad. They need to make it clear that they've thought this through and well enough that they can actually articulate what an end state with this war of choice in Iran would even look like. Then, when their case has been made, when the debate here in Congress is completed, then the members of this chamber must vote. It's our duty. Yes, it is our burden. It's the least we can do for those who are willing to sacrifice everything to safeguard this democracy. But if the Trump administration refuses to do that, if they refuse to adhere to the Constitution, well, then it begs the question, what are you hiding? What are you hiding, Mr. President? We already know you're incompetent. What else are you hiding? Look, we've now been at this war of choice, of Trump's choice, for a month and a half. Thousands are dead, grieving, wounded, suffering. Only someone as inept and unfit, someone as callous and cruel as Trump would see this as winning. Only a draft-dodging coward would think that this is the right way to engage in a war. Only a man so unqualified to be commander-in-chief would be proud to keep on risking our heroes' lives without even a concept of a plan for how to get them back home without risking more graves at Arlington. We can't let this chaos continue unchecked. As our troops continue to sacrifice whatever is asked of them, we senators need to do the absolute minimum required of us. That's why this week I'm calling up my War Powers resolution demanding that the Trump administration finally end this illegal war and to call for some actual public oversight and accountability on behalf of the American people. It will come to the floor for a vote shortly. So to my Republican colleagues, you have a choice, a simple one really. You can vote with me to end this conflict and show that you actually care about putting America first, like you claim, or you can vote to put Trump's ego first, proving that when push comes to shove, you care more about protecting Trump's thin skin than the Constitution that you swore to defend. At this point,
This is a political snare that the GOP simply cannot evade. Whenever a president oversteps his boundaries and bypasses Congress entirely, the illusion of a functioning democracy shatters by invoking the War Powers Resolution. Duckworth aggressively restores the rule of law, crushing the unitary executive mindset that treats the armed forces like the president's private security detail by forcing an official Senate vote. Duckworth ensures every lawmaker is permanently on the record. History will document exactly who defended the Founding Fathers' system of checks and balances and who caved to partisan obedience. The core lesson is clear. True accountability perishes in the dark, driven by impulsive midnight social media posts. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Should any president possess the unilateral power to ignore Article 1 and ignite a deadly conflict? Did Senator Duckworth's fierce Senate floor takedown restore your faith in congressional authority? Let's call out those who prioritize a fragile ego above the U.S. Constitution. But